Ever get that feeling? Like online especially, you're just drowning your messages about how you're supposed to feel, supposed to act.
It's relentless.
Yeah, it can be a lot. So today we're going to dive into, well, some ways to deal with that. Ways to actually take control of your mental state, even with all that craziness going on.
Right.
Our deep dive today is on this book, Moving Forward with Social Media by Conrad Reicher.
Oh yeah, I've heard of him.
He's a psychologist, but
Not the usual type.
exactly.
Not all about feeling.
Yeah, he's more about how cultural trends really mess with us, on an individual level. And he's not afraid to challenge some of the usual, what's the word?
Dogma.
Yeah, dogma about mental health.
And that's where it gets interesting, especially if you're a guy, right?
Percent. Like, is it even possible to be too open-minded? Has psychology just become like one big echo chamber?
And that's what Riker gets into.
Right. And then the biggest one for me, how do we actually take responsibility for our own mental well-being instead of feeling like, victims of everything and everyone else?
It's a great question. And Riker tackles it head on, which is what makes him so refreshing.
Okay, so to start off, Riker talks about this idea of what he calls the open-mindedness trap. He's got this story about a guy, Kyle, who starts hanging out with this flat earther group online.
Just out of curiosity, right?
Right, just to see what it's all about.
But here's where it gets interesting. The algorithms, right? They start feeding him more and more of that flat earth stuff.
It's like those algorithms create these echo chambers.
Totally. They're designed to keep you engaged, and they do that by showing you more of what you already agree with, even if it's, well, completely bonkers.
So Kyle's seeing all this supposed proof that the earth is flat, and it starts to become like his whole reality.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, can you be too open-minded?
Right.
Riker says what we need is selective open-mindedness.
I like that.
It's about questioning everything, sure, but also finding credible sources, actually thinking critically about the information you're taking in,
Don't just take everything at face value,
especially these days.
especially online. Yeah, you got to be your own filter.
That's huge, that discerning part.
Absolutely.
Okay, so then Riker, he goes on to talk about something that might surprise some people. The feminization of psychology.
Uh-huh.
He's not saying women can't be good psychologists, obviously.
right.
It's more that a field dominated by, one gender, one perspective.
Might lead to some blind spots.
Exactly. Might mean some ideas or treatments aren't helpful for everybody.
And I think it's like, who's deciding what mental health even is?
Right. Whose voices are we hearing and whose we're, maybe not hearing.
Exactly.
Riker uses emotional intelligence as an example. It's this big buzzword.
Oh, yeah.
But he says it's been way overblown.
Especially compared to, other kinds of intelligence. And it pushes this one way of handling your emotions,
Right.
expressing them. And that might not work for everyone,
Especially men.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So then he goes even further and says that this feminized view of psychology can actually end up pathologizing masculinity.
Mean.
So traits that have always been seen as, masculine,
Yeah.
assertiveness, competitiveness, even not showing your emotions all the time.
Being stoic.
Yeah, they get labeled as toxic now.
Yeah.
Or problematic.
Which, it makes you wonder, are there mental health issues that men have that we're just totally missing?
Because they don't fit the
Right.
mold.
Right. The current narrative.
Exactly. And again, it goes back to that selective open-mindedness thing.
Right. So-
Just because everyone's saying something doesn't mean it's the whole truth.
Right.
And then Riker brings up this thing he calls externalizing neuroticism.
Oh, that's a good one.
So break that down for us. What does that even mean?
It's that thing we all do. Blaming stuff outside of ourselves for how we feel. Like, instead of taking responsibility, for your own reactions, your own feelings.
So easy to do.
Oh, totally. It's like our default setting. Blame traffic for being late. Blame your boss for your stress.
When really you could have just left earlier or managed your time better.
Exactly. And Riker, he's saying we need a total mindset shift here.
Okay.
He's not saying we should ignore, systemic issues or blame victim,
Right.
but he's saying we have more control than we think. We can choose how we react to things.
More agency.
Exactly.
Wow.
We have the power to choose,
Yeah.
to actually take control of our mental health.
I like
And he
that.
gives you some actual tips, too, for doing that. Mindfulness, setting goals, finding healthy coping mechanisms.
So going from feeling like a victim to feeling empowered.
Exactly. And I think, this is huge for guys, especially. Guys who feel like they're constantly being told they're the problem.
That their masculinity is toxic.
Yeah, exactly. And Riker's message is, you're not powerless. You have choices.
Love it.
You can take control.
It's powerful, right? And it connects back to that selective open-mindedness thing.
Yeah.
Don't just accept the narrative. Question it
Yeah, challenge it.
and take responsibility.
Yes.
Yeah.
Own your own mental well-being. Don't just hand it over to someone else.
Perfect.
Right.
And that brings us to this other thing Riker talks about, this blame culture. This whole thing where we're so quick to point fingers
Oh, it's
instead of actually looking for solutions.
right. It's always someone else's fault.
He even links it to things like cancel culture and reality TV, which is Kind of fascinating.
Totally. Think about it. Reality TV, it's all about drama, conflict, who messed up, who's the villain, who deserves to get, canceled.
That it bleeds into like our everyday lives.
Absolutely. We're always looking for someone to blame instead of like looking in the mirror.
Which is crazy because if we're always blaming others, we're essentially saying we have no power.
Yeah, you're giving away your power.
It's like, I'm not in control. It's everyone else's fault.
It's disempowering.
And it stops us from actually fixing anything.
Right. It's all about blame, not solutions.
So Riker goes on to talk about the dangers of echo chambers online. It's like social media algorithms and our own, bias. They trap us in these bubbles where we only see stuff that we already agree with.
It can feel comforting at first, right?
Like everyone agrees with you all the time.
Yeah, but it's super dangerous because it distorts your whole view of, what's real.
You start to think that your way is the only way.
Exactly. And that's how you get things like political polarization, the spread of misinformation, all that stuff.
That's why critical thinking is so important, right? Like Riker keeps saying, question your sources.
Actively look for different viewpoints.
Don't be afraid to have a respectful conversation with someone you disagree with.
That's huge.
It's about being open to new ideas, but not to the point where you lose touch with, facts, with logic.
Right. You got to have some standards.
It's hard though, right?
No, totally. Especially online. You're just bombarded with information all the time.
An opinion. But it's crucial, if we want to be mentally healthy and intellectually honest.
Yeah. Being able to think for yourself is more important now than ever.
It's a lot to sort through. Like what's true, what's just noise, what do I actually need to pay attention to?
It is.
The cool thing is, Riker doesn't just leave you hanging with all the problems.
He gives you tools, right?
Exactly. Like he talks about how social media can actually make you, overconfident.
Oh, yeah. The whole instant expert thing.
Right. Everyone with a smartphone thinks they're suddenly, an authority on everything.
Just because they've read a couple articles or watched some YouTube videos.
It's dangerous though, right? Because then you start making decisions in real life based on that.
And usually not good ones.
You think you know more than you do, and you end up making choices you totally regret later.
Yeah, and it ties back to that critical thinking thing we were talking about. Just because something sounds convincing or looks good online doesn't mean it's actually true. Or even, good for you.
You gotta be questioning everything, especially the stuff that already fits your own bias.
Oh, absolutely. Because that's the stuff you're most likely to, fall for, right? The stuff that makes you feel good, validates your worldview.
Yeah, and this is where Riker's point about instant gratification culture comes in.
Oh, that's a big one.
He says that this need for constant validation, through likes and comments and shares, it can actually mess with your mental health.
It's like we're all addicted to that little dopamine hit you get.
Every time someone likes your post
Yeah.
or comments on your photo.
But it's never enough, is it?
Nope. And then you start comparing yourself to these overnight social media success stories.
Oh, yeah. Those are the worst.
You see someone blowing up online and think, well, why not me?
But the truth is, real success, the kind that lasts, it takes work.
It takes time.
Consistency.
And social media kind of hides all that. It's just a highlight reel.
Right. Not the behind the scenes grind.
It's funny, Riker even mentions how social media encourages you to share your struggles more than your wins.
Oh, totally. It's like you get way more engagement on a post about a bad day than a post about some big achievement.
What do you think that is?
Well, Riker, he actually cites research that shows this. Posts about our struggles, they just get more interaction, more likes, more comments.
That's wild.
It makes sense though, right? People empathize with struggle.
You want to offer support when someone's going through a rough time.
Right. But the problem is it can lead to this oversharing of negativity, which it's not always healthy.
It's almost like you're looking for validation for being miserable.
Yeah. And in a way, you're being rewarded for it. More likes, more comments. It's a weird cycle.
It is. So Riker's saying we need to be more careful about what we share.
Absolutely. It's not about pretending everything's perfect. It's about thinking about the effect your online presence has, on your own well-being and on other people too.
So it's not just about what we're taking in online, but what we're putting out there.
Our digital footprint. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about relationship. How's social media impacting that whole thing?
Oh man, that's a complicated one.
Because on the one hand, you can argue that it helps you stay connected, right?
Yeah, especially for, long distance relationships.
It's way easier to send a text or jump on a video call than wait for a letter in the mail.
Right. You can share updates, stay in touch, feel closer to people who are far away.
But then there's the flip side.
Oh, yeah. The dark side of social media.
There's all this pressure to present a perfect life online.
Totally. And then you get jealousy, right? Seeing your partner interacting with other people.
It can create so much tension.
Because it's so easy to misinterpret things online.
Tone, context.
All that stuff gets lost. And then, of course, you've got cyberbullying, online harassment.
That can be brutal.
Oh, it's awful. It's like the Wild West out there sometimes.
You can feel that way.
But it's important to remember we're not like helpless.
Right.
There are things we can do. Report harassment, block toxic accounts, talk to people you trust, friends, family.
Get support.
Exact. And remember, you're not alone in this. There are organizations, resources dedicated to, fighting this stuff, promoting online safety.
It's easy to focus on all the bad, But Riker reminds us that social media can be a force for good, too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Think about how it's been used for social change, raising awareness for important issues, connecting people with shared, interests, experience.
Yeah. Movements like #MeToo, Black Lives Matter, they gained so much momentum because of social media.
It's true.
And online fundraising, right?
Yeah.
For disaster relief, medical expenses. That's helped countless people.
And then you've got all these online communities where people can find support for, health conditions, different challenges they're going through.
It's amazing when you think about it. The potential is huge.
It is. It really shows you how these platforms can connect people, make a real positive impact.
The problem is that potential often gets overshadowed by all the negativity.
Right. Which is why it's so important to be mindful about how we use these platforms and the impact they have on, our mental health, our well-being. So the big question is, how do we find that balance? How do we use social media in a way that's, actually healthy and fulfilling?
Well, Riker, he talks about being more intentional with how you use social media.
Intentional.
It's not about quitting altogether. It's about using it in a way that serves you rather than the other way around.
So you're in control.
Exactly. You're the master of your digital domain.
I like that. So how do we actually do that? How do we become more intentional with our social media use?
Well, Riker talks about setting boundaries, like limiting your screen time,
Okay.
muting notifications, being picky about who you follow, who you engage with.
So like a spring cleaning for your social media.
Yeah.
Get rid of all the junk.
Exact. Out with the negative. And then he also stresses the importance of, real world stuff.
Real connections, real activity.
Getting out there, experiencing life firsthand.
Instead of just watching it through a screen.
It's all about that balance between your online life and your offline life. Social media can be a great tool, but it's not a replacement for actual human connection or real experiences.
And we have to remember, mental health is just as important as physical health.
Absolutely.
We need to prioritize self-care, whether that's going for a walk, reading a book, spending time with people you love, or even getting professional help if you need it.
Taking care of your mental well-being and not letting social media, control how you feel about yourself or how you see the world.
It's about choosing to focus on the stuff that really matters. So we've got digital minimalism, being more mindful online, setting realistic expectations. A lot, right?
It is, yeah. But Riker, he ties it all together with this idea of actually focusing on real-world connection, real-world activities.
Get off the screen and actually go live your life.
Exactly. Find things that, bring you joy outside of the digital world. Spending time with people you care about, hobbies, hearing, just getting out in nature.
Things that make you feel, actually alive, give your life meaning.
Yeah, and remembering that you're not just, a profile picture. You're a real person with real needs.
Needs for connection, for belonging, for a sense of purpose.
And those needs, they can't be met through a screen.
Man, this has been a great deep dive. I feel like I've learned a lot about myself, my own relationship with all this social media stuff.
Me too, honestly. It's given me a lot to think about. Definitely going to be more intentional about how I use it all.
So for our listeners, if they want to dig deeper into all this, where can they find Riker's book?
Moving Forward with Social Media. It's on Amazon Kindle, Google Play Books. Pretty quick read, but packed with good stuff, insights, practical advice.
Awesome. And before we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with one last thought from Riker. He asked this question, and it's really stuck with me. How can you use your social media presence to actually make a positive impact instead of just getting swept up in all the trends, all the noise?
It's a good one, right? It's a challenge to all of us to be more mindful, more intentional, more responsible.
To use these platforms for good, to connect with people in real ways, and to create a better digital world.
More humane, more empathetic.
A world that reflects, our actual values.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Until next time, stay curious.